Welcome to EPR. On today's episode, we will be interviewing Mike Mayer, an NAEP board member, and we'll be discussing environmental policy with him. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, Nick, you know that we are starting this podcast and it's for environmental professionals and as a community. So we're not only just people who work in these fields and are in our roles, but the greatness about NAEP and what they do and being environmental professionals is that we belong to a like-minded community. Yeah. And so one of the things that we want to do on this show is to get you all involved and not just be the Nic and Laura show, but we want to bring in all of our other comrades and can give them some congratulations and kudos. So we're going to be doing shout-outs at the start of every episode and really try to spread the love and give some congratulations, recognize people for promotions, awards won. You know, there's a lot of NAEP has an Environmental Professionals Award, and we don't get enough applications for it. There's not enough awareness about it. So if you have an award and people are winning it, let us know and let us give some recognition for that. So we're going to have a form on the website. You can just go over to environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and go over to the shout out request form and submit yours, and stay tuned and listen to hear it played back on radio.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And I love the idea of community. It's such a good, positive message. And I really do hope that you guys come on this journey with us and enjoy what we put out. And that's why we're doing this, because I think it'll be fun. So with that, somebody hit the music.
Nick, didn't you have a question for me about marketing or something?
Yeah, Laura, it's something, I won't get in the habit of praising you too much because I don't want that to go to your head, but,
please.
but I do have just doing this podcast with you. One thing I really noticed you've done a really good job of is networking, right? A lot of what the guests we see on the show, how the show has come together, it's been really driven by a lot of what you've done on a networking front. And I think it'd be great to hear a little bit about maybe if you have any advice on networking and how you kind of set up yourself for success in multiple ways.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, personal marketing, like networking. Okay. I kind of refer to myself as a networking queen. It's such a strange, I'm not a people person, but I can't help myself. I'm still curious about people. If I'm, the things that people get into, like interesting, I learn from other people. So I find myself a walking contradiction in that I like to be alone, and pandemic's I'm not one of those persons who I need people. I'm trying to get out. But it's also because I kind of just do. I do a lot of networking. I'm involved in a lot of stuff. I have a hard time saying no to things and getting involved in stuff. So, but I mean, as you've seen through some of our discussion, opportunities just kind of come at me a lot of times through networking because I've got connections to people and we work together on things. I mean, really, that's how I got started with NAEP was through some projects I had done through work. And when I went to get on the board of the TBAP, they're like, do you want to be vice president? And I think I already had a clue to this, but that was really first light bulb into hey, hello, networking. Yeah. This actual thing. A lot of people expect it to be something they get return on overnight. So when I'm career coaching and people will say, I sent out, I asked them who have you connected with? Well, I've sent out some messages, but I haven't got any responses and I haven't heard back, and just expect it to be, which I think a lot of people now with social media just expect everything to be instantaneous. Yeah. But I actually find that the return on investment from networking usually is anywhere between 90 days and X number of years.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of like marketing where people need to see you several times and you get in front of them many times and you get involved in lots of different things before they're like, you're top of mind for somebody else, essentially. Yeah. When I moved to Syracuse from Tampa, I actually made it a point to my strategy for getting plugged in here and finding out what's going on. Because again, photography, career coaching, business coaching, consulting. I'm kind of in all and environment. Is that all
you do? Is that it? Yeah.
Lanes. Yeah.
Right.
So I was my goal was to meet with someone new, cup of coffee every week.
Wow.
And it only took a few months before I was getting introduced to people I'd already met
Right.
And my line of like who else I should meet was way longer than I could keep up with. So I had saturated the market in less than a year. Just last month, I was nominated for an economic champion award here.
Oh, wow. Hey.
Like, I didn't win the award. There's other big companies and lots of other people doing things, but just to be nominated as someone who's just moved here was like, that's
pretty cool.
Direct effect of networking. Because I've gotten plugged in and started volunteering here and there and stuff. So anyone listening, I don't care where you're at in your career, just starting, or if you've been doing it a long time, networking is so important for any time you transition. So if you're transitioning from school to a job, or from job to retirement, or job to job, it's just so important to have those connections and be able to not only just take advantage when you want to ask for something, because you don't want to ask for something the first day you meet someone, especially about that relationship. And I've had people say too, like, they don't believe a network should be used that way, but I'm sorry. I think it's an honor when people come and ask me for something. So if I go and ask somebody for something, unless it's inappropriate or it's too often, if it's genuine, I'm not abusing that power and I'm not overdoing it. That's what we're here for. We're here to help each other do stuff. Especially that's what NAEP exists for, and why I'm so like into this organization.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. And it's healthy. It brings people to you. If you're asking them for advice, you're saying, hey, you're an expert. You're somebody I trust. Can you please help me out? Very few people are going to say no, because if they know you and they respect you, it's almost an organic thing. It's not a burden. It's just a request. And so, but you did mention one thing that I thought was really interesting. You mentioned basically what I'm hearing you say is you're an introvert, right? You're an introvert who's really good at marketing. And I think that's a really important point to make, because a lot of times people will use that as a shield for not doing networking. Oh, well, I'm an introvert. I don't like people. And it doesn't have to be something that you avoid for that reason. I think introvert doesn't mean you don't talk to people, and doesn't mean you can't network. It just means at the end of the day, you want all of them to go away. And that's not a bad thing. It's just how you are at the end of the day. And I really appreciate that.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up too, because that is absolutely true. And my favorite sort of definition or explanation of introvert extrovert is just that if you're an introvert, being around people sucks your energy. And if you're an extrovert, being around people gives you energy. Right. So definitely, if you're one of those people that goes to a party, you can be an introvert and have fun at a party, but when you're done with the party, you want to go home and crash. If you're an extrovert, you want to party till 4 a.m. and keep it going. You're
the last person there. Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's kind of tell the difference. I'm that person who wants to show up, have a great time, and then go home and be myself.
Right.
And I think that you're exactly right. People will use that as an excuse. Well, I'm an introvert. And that's one thing I have a problem with some personality type exercises, because they will often give people not the power to take action, but actually give them excuses to take inaction. Right. And so people will say, well, I'm an introvert. So Myers-Briggs told me that it's okay for me to not go out and network. Like, no, that's not what it's telling you. It's telling you that you need to come up with other ways to get around that. And I do that. Right. I limit how many meetings I have a day. Other business consultants will have, or coaches will have call after call after call. And I'm like, oh dear. By the time I got to that third call, I will be worthless to my client, because you just have to recognize that. Yeah.
You understand your limitations and you work within them. And whenever you can be really focused and really dedicated, but you know that you can only do that for a certain amount of time. It's everybody's energy bucket is different. And really, I think even putting people in to two buckets is kind of crazy, right? So you're either an introvert or an extrovert, right? Like nobody works on that way. It's definitely a spectrum. And there's even times where you'll want to be, where I'm sure you would stay later to a party you were really having a good time in, even though you are an introvert. So there's days where you'll be a little more extroverted or a little more introverted. And so it's understanding yourself and understanding how to use your mentality and the way you work to your benefit.
Yeah. And I think, the main takeaway is just, like you said, figure yourself out and then find a way to do it. Yeah. Whether, maybe it's more comfortable, maybe it's you need to change the setting, or maybe you need to change who you're meeting with. Right. Those types of things can change the atmosphere and how your energy level feels and your comfortability as well.
Right.
Is that a word? Comfortability?
Yes, it is today. Today it's a word. We'll make it.
Okay, fantastic.
Perfect. Okay, well, we want to welcome Mike Mayer to the podcast. He's a senior environmental planning lead for HDR. out of Minneapolis. And so, Mike, I know you've got 20 years of experience in natural resources, primarily in the energy sector. Is that correct?
I would say energy and natural resource management.
Yeah. And so what kind of drew you into that? Like, where did you start?
Sure. So I started, a long time ago, my grandfather had run a conservation camp back in New England, outdoor education. And so really kind of got my upbringing through that kind of thought process and exposure kind of to the outdoors, and wanted to go into wildlife and fisheries biology for college. Did that. And now here I am as a senior environmental planning lead 20 years later.
So what is a conservation camp? Like, is that like literally like taking you out into the woods and being like good luck, or,
No, I think those are survival camps.
Oh, right.
A conservation camp is basically an outdoor school. It's called different things in different places, but this was back, I was a kid. So this was back in the 70s.
Oh, that's awesome.
He ran one, and there's one in New England for a long time, Stone Environmental Schools. And so I had exposure to that growing up.
Oh, that's great. And you mentioned, so you went to school and you got your master's, and you asked us to tell you about what's this about catching a deer for the first time, your master's project?
So I did my undergrad and grad work at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And my thesis was on looking at the harvest model for white-tailed deer in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And so to do that, we needed to capture some and radio tag them, and then do some surveys to determine actually what kind of numbers we're dealing with. And the way that I went about capturing them was using what they call rocket nets. And so you're sending this big old net over a bunch of deer and going out. And I remember the first time we did that, I had a bunch of volunteers helping me.
Right.
And I was the closest one. I was halfway out in the field and launched a little detonator, shot the rockets over them, caught two, a big doe and a yearling. And I remember I got out to the doe and got her on the ground, and the first volunteer ran past me.
Right.
I was like, okay. And the second volunteer ran past me. And at the fourth one ran past me. I was like, hey, can someone help me with this bigger one? Kind of kicking me.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Well, how did that end? Did you get the job done?
Yeah, I finally had some help. And we we got her blindfolded and hobbled and put a collar on her and let her go. And she was fine.
Oh, that's great. Yep. So do you still follow, are you still a white-tailed deer enthusiast? Do you still follow like that back home?
At times. So when I worked for the Park Service, I did a lot of white-tailed deer management plans for the National Park Service.
Oh, right.
And including some chronic wasting disease work. Yeah. And so I still kind of track that, especially here in Minnesota, the Midwest.
Right. Yeah. It's chronic wastings is a really tough problem. I know we've had issues with that in Virginia, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of those things where it's a feed problem, right? People are putting out feed, and then you have a disease vector coming all into one place. Were you seeing that when you worked for the Park Service? Is that the issue of people kind of making the disease a little worse, or is it something different?
No, it was when I was working with the Park Service, we were dealing with really high densities of deer.
Right.
And so trying to manage deer. And then, I think this was back in the mid 2000s, maybe early 2000s, there was a chronic wasting disease discovered in West Virginia.
Right.
And it was the first one there. And so the concern was that it would work through the native herd. Yeah. A lot of the problems that they believe is it comes from more of a captured herd and captive bred deer, transferring it to wild deer. Yeah. But it's one of those diseases. It's related to mad cow. It's related to a couple others, or kind of jump species lines.
Right. Yeah, which I know is it's a tough problem to solve. But you actually also kind of touched on another thing I wanted to ask you about. So you have a background working on the federal side of regulations and on the the consulting side. So I don't know, maybe you could talk a little bit about the differences you see in the industry and maybe some pointers for those.
Sure. Yeah, I had the opportunity to work for both agencies within the Department of Energy as well as Department of Interior. And so really get to understand how those agencies work and kind of how agencies work generally. And then I had an opportunity in consulting to work with more agencies and see how it all kind of fits together, which has been really helpful. And so for me, it's kind of been trying to figure out, and especially with politics and changes in regulations and executive orders and all those kinds of things, trying to really navigate where we're headed so that we can provide, advice to our clients. Sometimes our clients are agencies, and, on where we think things are going. So it's definitely been helpful having that inside perspective, being an agency employee for a number of years, and then coming at it from the outside as well.
do you see that that's an advantage, having background in both federal and consulting?
I do find it as an advantage. It's really helpful. A lot of times you can talk with the agency client a little bit more candidly about some of the stuff that they're dealing with, because the stuff you dealt with as an agency employee as well. And oftentimes civil servants don't get a lot of respect.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you can totally relate to that. It's similar to with my background in law and biology. I usually can talk to biologists pretty well, and I can talk to lawyers pretty well, when sometimes lawyers and biologists don't talk very well to each other. So it's kind of right. Being able to speak those languages helps a little bit.
Right. Yeah. It's the nature of a consultant, I think, right? You have to be able to put on a lot of different hats.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you talk about the, regulations and differences between agencies. And, we've talked candidly before about the final rule for CEQ as well. And so do you feel like there's some advantages to kind of helping across the board for agencies in those regulations?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of understanding what the overall intent is, I guess, of implementing the new regulations, I think that each agency and department is going to come up with their own guidance on how to implement them. Right. And so I'm talking with the client just the other day about the new regs, and he's waiting for agency guidance on how to implement them. So, right. And, having worked under the old regs and now looking at how the new regs are changing some of the things, and being able to look at the lot of case law that help define where we are with NEPA specifically, I think it definitely helps to provide some suggestions, I guess, for things for them to ask and just kind of probe a little bit more. It's like, is this really what we're doing? Is this the best approach? Is this how we want to proceed, kind of thing? Yeah,
and I think that's a good point too. And it's another one, something I wanted to ask you. You've also taught a lot of courses on sustainability, environmental law in general. And so we're talking about very complicated things that we're trying to put in bite-sized form. And so can you maybe discuss the challenges of trying to teach that? And because that applies, I think, also when you're managing a project. It's the same skill. So
sure. Yeah, well, so it's funny. So sustainability, much like adaptive management, is defined 16,000 different ways depending on who's making the definition. And so it can be really challenging to try to agree on one definition of how a term should be implemented or how an approach should be implemented. Sometimes I get on my little bandwagon about NEPA because I think NEPA is a sustainability law. It's one about balancing and harmonizing and those kinds of things. And when I was teaching those courses, a lot of times sustainability, you talk about the triple bottom line of kind of balancing social, political, and environmental issues to find that sweet spot for a sustainable decision. Right. And NEPA is not very different in terms of looking at those same kind of considerations. So that's kind of how I've, in those kinds of terms, kind of tried to provide some, I guess, common approaches to those kind of big questions.
Perfect. And so one of the fun things we like to do around here is, to kind of, now that we've done all of our, very difficult policy talk, we like to ask some fun questions. So you mentioned that you actually write fiction.
I do.
As one of your hobbies. So, okay. All right. So I have to know what kind of fiction do you write? Where can we buy the Mike Mayer novel? Novel?
Right now you can't buy it anywhere.
Okay.
No, so part of my little ways to escape the reality of the profession
yeah.
is writing fiction. And so I write thrillers. Oh, yeah. I've been doing it since I was in law school. It was a way for me to kind of escape law school for a couple hours a weekend, go to a coffee shop and just write a story.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been doing that for a number of years. I have a couple, and I recently actually acquired an agent and looking forward to trying to find a publisher for.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That's really incredible. So
maybe my hobby will turn into something more.
Yes, right. We are interviewing seasoned veteran Mike Mayer, future famous artist. I can talk. Yeah. That's really neat, actually. So, is that something you just picked up, or is it something you've always wanted to do?
Too.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah. For me, so it's always been like the ones I write have a little bit of an environmental bent to them in terms of what the issues are. So a lot of it's writing from what I know. And thrillers are just fun because they're fast paced and you don't really have to do a ton of research.
Right.
For thrillers.
Right.
Because, once it becomes work, I'm not sure it'd be a fulfilling hobby anymore.
Exactly.
I mean, there's some research you do, but you don't have to map it all out. And the way that I write is kind of by the seat of my pants. So I'm not a big outliner, those kinds of things. So it's just something that this story in my head, I got to get it down on the keyboards.
Yeah. That's great. So there's lots of different ways to write. And do you find that you need to kind of set aside like, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes writing about whatever comes into my brain and then another 10 minutes just expanding on that? Or do you have a different process?
For me, I have a different process. Usually I have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And COVID has made that very difficult. And our house is full. And there's nowhere to really go here to get away. And so I find myself getting a cup of coffee and taking my car and driving to like a trailhead and sitting in the passenger seat and writing.
Yeah.
Just as a way to get out and get my coffee and write. And typically the way I write is that it's just it's really like an ongoing story in my head and it takes different turns. And sometimes I'll go back when I am done with the first draft and I'll be like, well, that turn didn't work out very well.
Right.
And go back that way. But yeah, usually I don't do a ton of planning. I have some notes in terms of where I think the story's going, but if it goes somewhere completely different, that's fine too.
Yeah.
So
do you like when you go back and read it again? Because I have this problem. Like, I'll go back and I'll read it and I'll be like, I am an idiot. Why did I say that? Like, what? You know what I mean? And so how do you kind of balance needing to, proofread with actually, pushing the narrative forward?
Yeah, that's a hard question, I guess, in terms of the process. I've also used a lot of beta readers, having people read it for me because, with editing, so the glamour is writing, right? Most of the work is editing. And you spend time writing the novel and then you spend 3 times as much time editing the novel. And, I pretty much have the first one memorized because I've read it so many times and gone through it so many times.
Right.
So, it's sometimes it's really helpful to get that outside point of view too. What's really funny about the first one is I had no idea about marketing books. Right. And so my first novel was 180,000 words.
That seems like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know that. And I went to an agent and she's like, yeah, thrillers are about 90,000 words. I said, I have to cut out every other word. Okay.
It would be a very unique read. I'm just saying.
It would be.
Right.
People would miss some things, I think. But
right.
No, and so, it really challenges you to whatever you write the first time, you have to be willing to cut.
Yeah.
The second time. And you can't be so invested. Same with characters, right? You get invested in characters you develop and then, you decide you really should kill them.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's one of the hardest things in the world. And actually, it does apply to NAEP too, right? It's when you're writing, taking something and then trying to write it with fewer words, right? It's just almost always, if you can say the same thing with fewer words, you're almost always better off. But when you care about something, it's so much harder.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, or you feel like you're not doing it justice. You're not explaining it enough.
Right.
Exactly. Because it is important. Yeah, those are challenging.
Yeah, but that's really great. So, yeah, I don't know, Laura, I know you didn't jump in there, but if there's anything else you wanted to ask him, now is the time. So
I think it was fantastic. I just love everybody has a different hobby thing that they do. There's no one has a nothing, like I'm an environmental scientist and that's all that I am. There's some other thing.
Yeah. Being just what I do for work would depress me for.
Yeah.
Gotta have an out.
I know you absolutely do. That's 100% true.
Yep.
Which is great. That would be a great lead in for that other. We were talking about having a conversation, inviting somebody on who does some work with environmental and climate change depression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
yeah, it is. I mean,
now,
you're like, what does this all matter?
Yeah.
Oh.
I was joking with Laura. Like when I was a kid, like there was optimism, right? It's just unbridled optimism. It was like Captain Planet was the thing, and you can save the planet. Here's a shirt, a T-shirt, go save the world, and
put a brick in your tank and you're done.
Yeah. But now it's quite the opposite. It's like, okay, it's too late. You guys have really messed up, and now we're all screwed. It's really tough. You know?
Exactly.
Right.
No, and trying to, explain to your kids, you're like, talk to grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, I know.
We were the skip generation. Sorry. We would have tried, but the boomers wouldn't give us any time of day.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
They were too busy plopping us in front of the TV and saying,
That's right.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Your microwave dinner.
Yeah, right. That's too funny. I just want to say I really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate the energy and yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, hey, thanks. It was really great to see you guys and chat with you, and I'm excited about this podcast. So
cool, yeah. Looking forward to have you back and hear more about your writing and other.
Yeah, maybe someday I'll be published.
Yeah. When you're published, we'll do the first exclusive interview. You heard it, here, folks. He said yes. I'm pretty sure. So yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mike.
That's our show.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next time.